for me, it's very much about pushing around these characters and looking, at them um, outside of their on the track story. You've gotten the story going and it's rolling forward. God forbid we get to issue 3 of Turbo, and I start yakking about, well, we need more Martians. All right, welcome to our first episode of Pinups.
Well, we discussed a little bit about what this might be and might not be, but I love doing pinups. I love doing covers. I love doing model sheets. Um, and I also love doing show and tell. We spoke about that too. So maybe we'll have a brief segment of show and tell. But I think as we start this start this episode, I'm gonna further refine this shot of Turbo proclaiming victory after defeating somebody, and we'll see if this can become a pinup or a cover or all the above or none of the above, and see where this goes. But yeah, so I'm just gonna start tightening this up in regular pencil now because I have my blue line pencil here, so I'm gonna pick the best lines here and ignore the other ones and see
And
where
you
this
and
is.
you and you've been so kind to finally send me a copy of this um, pinup. This is the original pinup for Turbo Pit Fighter, right?
No, that one is
No?
that's a later one. Yeah, the first one doesn't. The first one is a little bit more conceptual. I showed it in a couple of episodes, but I don't think I have it here. I think it's downstairs. And it didn't have Trophy Girl, and it was similar, but she was just like shiny hair, maybe like thinner waist, wider hips, and not as muscular yet. But it had the name and the title, and so it goes from there. Like it wasn't it was refined a little bit. Actually, I did base the shirt on a character I penciled for an indie comic back in the 90s, and kind of broke it out into its own character. Like it was just kind of like a throwaway character, like when you have two bad guys and one of them's like just wearing a shirt or something. So it's an evolution here, but yeah, I could bring back out the very first picture I did. I think I had this I was working at the print shop back then in Connecticut, and I had all this great paper, right? And I got this glossy paper, and I was just loving how the glossy paper was working along with these rollerball pens.
Uh-huh.
It's like it was really shiny, and the ink was just kind of sitting up on it, and it was really like just special. So I started doing this conceptual stuff, and I did a bunch of covers. I think I was trying to be funny, and this was our exploitation days, right?
Yes.
We were doing all these things, and so I was just spitballing ideas, and Turbo Pit Fighter was one of them. So
Yeah, well,
um,
the way I remember it was, you know, we, especially when we were at cons, or we were just hanging out working on projects, we were always in our sketchbooks or making what's so famously referred to now as pinup art. Um, but oh, look at that. I got a low battery mode. What the hell? I'm supposed to
already,
have, yeah, but I'm supposed to be hooked up to,
maybe you weren't plugged in right today.
I don't know. I'm gonna try, no, I'm not here. I'm actually gonna unplug
Okay,
and then replug.
hopefully I
Oh,
can get
here we
you.
go. I got it. I got it. All right.
Got the
Sorry about
rose
that,
color.
everybody. Yeah.
No problem. Yes.
Um, so yeah, we would spitball as like check this idea out, check this. Oh, what do you think of it? And yeah, I mean, a lot of times we were just trying to make each other laugh or what have you. But I literally, you were working on Turbo, like, I don't even remember you showing me pages or anything. It was literally a, hey, I finished Turbo. You want to ink it? And I was, yeah, sure. And then, you know, as we've said before in our other episodes, life stepped in, um, and just basically derailed us for a time being till now. So,
Yeah, I mean, I might even be guilty of, when we were thinking of like kind of like exploitational ideas, it's like you're just thinking of things that pop off the page. I was kind of flipping through this last week about the history of before they were called Marvel Comics, they were like a series of shell publishing corporations, and they would have all of these kind of ideas that were exploitational, right? There was a lot of bondage and a lot of,
yeah, yep,
you know, a lot of hype, and you know, promises, right? And that were like, all these things jumping off the page, that lie within, and then you get into the story, and it's like mediocre, right? So we were kind of in that vein. I guess it's like a little a little bit of desperation, trying to get noticed and trying to like set
yes,
yourself apart from everybody else. But it's also kind of like campy and trying to take off on these pulps and these ideas. And there's plenty of people doing it. We were in the indie space, and also really keeping our eye on the underground space. Like maybe 10 years or 20 years before that. And there was a lot of stuff being done for shock value. There was a lot of stuff just being done because there was just newfound freedom, and there was no authority that was preventing anybody from putting something on a printing press, really. And all these ideas started to flourish. So we were just in that mix. And I wrote a whole bunch of scripts in my early days, or treatments, let's say.
yeah,
I do have some scripts, but sometimes it's like three-quarters of a first issue, or sometimes it's like just a bunch of notes, and so all that. But I really like the idea of a strong lesbian character in a post-apocalyptic setting in pit fights, holding her own with all of the the brutal men, and the wrestler gimmicks and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't have much else, but then I said, well, let's do the trophy girl. And right on the first page, in those little head square, those little heads, is like also featuring, the trophy girl and the robot, and and the man at arms. So I had all those stuff as the original kernel for the property, but you expand on it. So I have all these, typewritten pages, or word processed pages of notes. Some of them, like, I don't know what I was thinking. You go into like different directions of a story, and you're like, all right, well, that doesn't hold up. I'm not using that. And a lot of it is good. I was just going through all of these, issue breakdowns, where I imagined that there was going to be issue one, issue two, issue three, issue four. And I wrote as much as I could as the ideas and the plots they kept coming. And so I have all that stuff, and we are using it um, for our graphic novel. And so I'm making a lot of decisions about what to put in and what not to, and what to redo, and kind of think about it new. But the idea is still the same, and so Turbo Pit Fighter is going to be our flagship release for whatever this endeavor is. And and maybe there'll be some more uh titles, because I just love the idea of just flinging these ideas around, and then putting them out. Look how many little covers and boxes and squares. And they were kind of chasing the market, but they were also coming up with some really original stuff. And they had good artists. Definitely they didn't skimp on cover art. They had really nice cover art. So that's kind of one of my drivers is, what they call flooding the market or flooding the zone, just coming up with a lot of ideas and, putting them out there, whether it's just like a little glimpse of something, and you get to it when you get to it. Um, or, because those are all trial balloons, right? And, somebody sees a post or a pinup you did and they say, hey, is there any sequential stuff on that? Or, you know, um, it's good feedback. And, I'm finding out that Marvel did a lot of that in the early days when they were getting the Reborn superhero line off the ground. Um, for example, Captain America, after Fantastic Four was established in the early 60s, like 62, 63, um, they started to have some success, and Jack Kirby wanted to bring back Captain America. So what they did is they had like an issue of like Tales of Suspense, I think, and they had a guest appearance by a character called the Acrobat, but in the story he dresses up as Captain America, and so it looks like a Captain America story, but if you actually read, it's just a guy dressing up as Captain America within the universe. And they were doing that because they wanted to see what the reaction was on it. And I didn't realize how important the letters that they were receiving were. Um, Stan Lee was saying that they get hundreds of letters every day, sometimes 500 a day, and that, and he said, and we read every one, which is of course a lie, but but they were getting a lot of feedback, and what great marketing research it is to have your readers writing to you. And and there was also this nascent um, fan community, especially this particular guy by the name of Jerry Bayless, who was in very close touch not only with Stan Lee but also Julius Schwartz from DC. And believe it or not, they were sending some of these fans with like really thoughtful letters, original art. They were just sending them and giving it to them for nothing as like rewards for them being interested. And so,
Fanzines are a huge thing. I collect specific ones I go after. I have a Seraphim, I think it's number two, from like 1968, which is basically a Bernie Wrightson portfolio.
uh-huh,
So it's all, and it's him, in his sword and sorcery obsessions. And I actually had him sign that I think about 2 years before he passed away at Baltimore Comic Con, and so was able to thank him for being one of those individuals, which were very far and few between, that were committed to Conan the Barbarian, obviously, but there was just through the fanzines a lot of excitement, and a very ecstatic, like, I love it so much, but I'm not good enough to work at Marvel and work on Conan, so I'll make my own version of it, and we get all these Conan clones.
right.
So
Yeah, I mean, fanzines were kind of like a proving ground for, amateurs and semi-pro, and get some published stuff in front of an editor maybe. That's how John Byrne, got off the ground with some, art that appeared in some fanzines, and then he got some, some indie work. I think it was Charlton. But yeah, but right from the beginning, like in 62, 63, I mean, I didn't know fanzines went back that far. And they were very prescient. They were saving every letter, and they were saving every bit of art. And sometimes Jack Kirby would like draw them a little sketch of the thing, and respond to a letter, and they would save all of that stuff. And they were also in very close communication with Stan Lee. He was sending them a lot of detailed, inside baseball stuff about what was going on. And, it ends up being important today to the authors that are trying to put together the definitive histories of how that happened. So, I mean, it's like if you think about a kid and they saw Action Comics #1 and they had the wherewithal to like put it in a bag and get an extra copy, and put it away. So that's kind of like, how the fanzine people were. They knew this was going somewhere and that this stuff might be studied for decades, right?
I don't know. I can't speak to it. I think, when you look at the those as the original fanboys, I just believe they believed in it wholeheartedly to the point where there's probably some OCD going on. They
Oh
just
yeah.
wanted to think. I don't think they had any level of prediction, in the MCU universe and major movies being made. I think it was just um, whether it's going to be around to at least to have the issues to go back to and reread, because that is also a huge part of comic books. Is it was a solitary form of entertainment, but it was also giving you the ability to, like today, it's a perfect day to pull out a stack of comics because it's raining out and you feel a little gloomy and it's a Friday, and what have you, throw on some moody music and just go wherever that comic book is taking you. You know, um,
Yeah, so that in the early going in the early history of Marvel after Fantastic Four was released, and then the rest of the titles, Ant-Man and the Hulk and all that, they started to see some pretty brisk sales. And I call it flooding the zone because I'm very inspired, to put out like lots of different titles and characters, and just to do like promos for them at least. But it turns out, I was just reading that because Fantastic Four was so successful, around issue 7, they go from bi-monthly to monthly. And that, of course, displaces a different title because they had distribution for 8 titles with their big newsstand distributor, and so they were, instead of doing 8 monthly titles, they were doing 16 bi-monthly titles, which is flooding the zone. And so Fantastic Four goes monthly because the sales are so brisk, and so Martin Goodman makes the appeal to the distributor, and he relents and he allows them, going forward, 11 titles per month instead of 8. And so that was a momentous time because they were just releasing Iron Man in Tales of Suspense, based on a Jack Kirby sketch, and it was given to Don Heck, and he was going to be using the Marvel technique, for scripting, which means you just get a synopsis and you have to do everything. Um, and they were also, they had also released Ant-Man and Thor by now. And so because they had this new capacity is when they decided they were going to do the X-Men. That's when they decided that they were going to release the X-Men. And um, some of the stuff is very interesting to me because Spider-Man comes out in Amazing Fantasy 15, and there's a letters column in Fantastic Four where Stan is plugging some of their other characters and says, "Yeah, Spider-Man isn't going to be out for a while. He's just going to be doing guest appearances in other um, titles, but we have big plans for him eventually." And then of course he got the Amazing Spider-Man #1, but there was a period in there. Oh, and by the way, um, who knew this? But Hulk was canceled at issue #5, and
what?
that yeah, Hulk was canceled at issue #5. And it wasn't necessarily that it was doing bad, but it was just relative to what they could be putting out because they only had 11 slots at that point. You know,
Mm.
and I believe it said that Fantastic Four #11 was the first issue that had Marvel Comics written on the cover. So they started. I think it started out with a blurb that said, the Marvel Comics age, the Marvel age of comics. And no, actually, I'm wrong. That was not Fantastic Four. It was Fantastic Four 17 in March of 1963 because Stanley was writing the cover copy. And that was the first time he used the phrase Marvel Age of Comics in print. And as a result, by the Fantastic Four 14 was hitting the stands, and that was the first use of the company name Marvel Comics Group, and it made made an honest man out of Martin Goodman, to finally have a name that was like not a fly by night name, and
Shell.
it was starting to get very successful. So really interesting stuff. Um, Also, something I didn't know was that instead, because they had limited resources and Jack Kirby was spread really thin as kind of like, he was carrying this whole operation on his shoulders, doing most of the covers and doing, all of the heavy lifting, is that they didn't want him to take up his time drawing Hulk #6, so they canceled it and they had him start on Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos #1, right about that time. And that was supposedly based on a conversation that Stan was having with Martin Goodman, in which Stan said that he really had a great vehicle going with this realism idea. Like he could take, he said he could take any topic and make it realistic using this new Marvel method, where you have characters that have ups and downs and they're bickering and there's a lot of like I guess like comical dialogue on every page. So supposedly it was a dare, and Stan Lee told Martin Goodman, "You give me any topic, and we can make it. We can do it with realism and have it be successful," because they really were on a roll. And so Martin Goodman said, "War." Right? Because this was like 62, 63. This was maybe like the height of the Cold War, and war was such an unpopular subject. So they said, okay. And they took on the challenge, and they that's when gave birth to Sergeant Fury. And so Jack started working on that instead of the Hulk. And, you know, I, he would eventually become Nick Fury and Agent of Shield, but that was later on. They kind of morphed the timeline in. But yeah, I didn't realize, like, you would think that, since they were having all the success with the superheroes, that they would, keep doing the superheroes. But, they were still doing Millie the Model, during these days, and they were still doing romance comics during these days, and it was just starting to creep in. It wasn't like the be all end all, although it was really, really getting a lot of reaction. It was really getting a lot of reaction from these young boys and these, like idealistic, imaginative fans, that were writing in, and you know, and even when they were critical, they were critical because they cared so much, and you
Yeah.
know, there was all of these like comments about the plot wasn't so good, and because they wanted it to be better, and they wanted to like it so much, right? They just had so much visual appeal, but the stories weren't there, and so Stan, in his defense, right there in the letters column says, you know, he goes, we are on a time crunch here, and we're kind of like slapping this crap together. And he said, if we, at some point stop and do something that does not have a time-bound deadline, he said, well, then you just wait and see. It'll be, the most amazing thing you've ever seen, right? So that's what was going on. That was the reality. And, we have to take our hats off because they did amazing things under pressure. And, they were grouchy. They sacrificed their home lives and, things like travel and vacation, which artists need to do. You need to go out and refresh your mind and stuff. So,
Mhm.
But but this was the golden. This was like the classic beginning age of Marvel Comics. So we're just happy for everything that it led to, and then eventually they ended up expanding their bullpen and getting more offices. They say they only had a tiny office space where Stan had a little office and there was another desk in there, and they would sit down and have meetings, and the artists would come and go, and a lot of them were working from home. So just the beginning was a very interesting time. And and right around this time also, you see Doctor Strange was conceived as a 5-page um a 5-page filler inserted into Strange Tales. And Stan Lee, in one of the letters columns, credited Steve Ditko with the idea. So I think he would kind of like reinvent history later when he wrote Origins of Marvel Comics, and tried to make it seem like everything was his idea. But he said that they started out with just a short comic, and that but they had both Steve Ditko and Stanley had big plans, and they knew that they could do something more with that. So it was going to expand later, and so that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to like release some pinups and release some covers, some just vaporware covers, and then just hold on to them, and then they're lying there, so then maybe you meet somebody that you can collaborate with, and you have all these things available. Or maybe you meet a publisher and you want to show them the breadth of your creative output. And they always say, if you're going into a pitch meeting, have something sticking out of the back of your pocket, the back pocket, just in case, right?
Yeah.
Because you might never have that FaceTime again. And if your plan A doesn't go, you know, like you want, then you got nothing to lose by pulling out plan B. I'm sure that's happened plenty of times. What else you got, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
got anything in the way of cowboys and ninjas? Because those two seem to be just hotcakes for the kids nowadays.
yeah, publishers are thinking of the bottom line, and in a lot of ways it's
Yep.
very practical because they're responsive to the distributors, and they're responsive to actual sales, not creative fantasies, and spitballing. They need to see things prove themselves out on the street. And and then the public, of course, is so quirky, right? You never know what's going to catch on and what won't. There's a lot, same thing with music. There's like, how did that get to be a hit? And people
They
are just
played it over and over and over again while you're in the car driving through the Badlands of the United States of America.
right. Yeah,
It
well,
just
that's
ends up still, you know what I mean? Most of these songs, it was just up until internet or,
yeah, well, that's called
anything like was.
that's payola, right? You got something, you
Hmm.
get something on the air. The mob was involved in a lot of that. But with comics, it was like no, it was it wasn't the same, because with comics, Marvel and DC had limited space, and there was a lot of other stuff that was crowding it. There was all these knockoffs, and there was like literally publishers that would just steal, characters, and they would actually just steal, published work and just reprint it. The audacity. But you had people doing that too, and distributors would give that space because it might not be legal, but it was a quick buck, and they were also selling at a discount because those things were hot potatoes. Once they printed them up, people didn't want to hang on to those in a warehouse where you could get raided or anything, right? So I saw Plastic Man and the Human Fly were just run off by some company called like Starlight Entertainment. What was it? It was Super Comics, 1963. You had look, these bootleg comics were coming out with the Human Fly, the Blue Beetle, the Spirit, and Plastic Man. Drawn by other people without any licensing without any rights to it. So so it was still kind of like a dog eat dog, world out there, and it was a very rough and tumble space because printing was expensive, takes a lot of time. There's long lead times, and and the field was so crowded with stuff. So maybe today things are a little bit better because you know there's not too many comics really on the newsstand, and it's all like specialty shops, and people know where to find conventions, and they know that they can order online and do other things now. But but it's also worse because you don't have that kind of just like you know just street traffic aspect of, oh,
Yeah.
somebody picked up my book,
Or because it's really, I mean, I can't remember how many comics I ended up just buying because I thought this was the day that they were dropping next X-Men issue or Teen Titans or Conan the Barbarian or whatever, and you show up and it's not there, but you need a comic book. You need a
R-
comic book, any kind of comic books. You end up flipping through all of them. That kills 45 minutes to an hour. And
right?
the guy that owns the shop is like, "Come on, you kill me, kid. It's not a
Yeah,
library." That's what my guy used to say to me all the time. It's not a library. Come on, buy
right,
something.
right.
And then I'd be like, I need something, and then I'd lean into something like Warlord, DC's Warlord ended up.
Mike
I
Grell.
picked up Mike Grell, and it was I'm still not a Mike Grell fan in the way of the art. Story's a little, and I'm talking when I back in the day, like the story was confusing to me and everything. But as I grew with that comic, and it was a very sad day when they discontinued it, because I was really into it because I was also getting education about the whole Sword and Planet, Edgar Rice Burroughs, John Carter, Man of Mars, Princess of Mars, the whole being of this time and then getting catapulted to Mars, and there's these Martians and he's racing, and that's comics.
Yeah,
That is literally the formula for boys. I can only speak for myself, but that's why you wanted to just escape, and going into those pages, and especially when they are well rendered, and well written, is kind of tough to put out there, but it was just something that you would, it, it, you would escape, but then you would get fuel for your own fire. So you would either go out with your boys and play Warlord or Princess of Mars or, guns or whatever it was. But then the other part of it would be like, no, I'm not leaving. I'm going to grab my, a stack of paper, and I'm going to copy the Warlord. So you start copying
yeah,
panels and characters, but then you start thinking about your own and everything, and it kind of comes back around to what you were saying right out of the gate here about you know putting putting things out in order to get attention in a flooding way,
yeah,
and but at the same point, it's I'm not good enough to do a comic book or work for a professional publisher, but I've got these ideas,
yeah,
and that's a
yeah,
huge amount of the from the 60s into the 70s, especially with someone like Roy Thomas coming in. I mean, he was, king of all fanboys, and that's what he was bringing into,
right place,
as well
right
as
time.
Jim Shooter. Jim Shooter. He just,
Yeah, Jim Shooter, I
he's got
think I think he was like literally like 12 or something when he went.
14.
Yeah,
He
right.
started working as a writer, 14 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That that's
and
a
and
that's a great story.
oh, I mean, you can't dismiss him.
Yeah. So so yeah, you have some people that they just said, wow, I have to get into this. Like, I don't want to just be a passive reader, and
Or he
they
could even start out with, "How do I get into this?" And then the flight of fancy is one where you end up in a situation. And that other person just says, well, yeah, I mean, if you can give me something like this, we probably could use it because you run home and you put 20 million hours into it, or what
Right.
have you. And then the next thing you know it, you're off and
Well,
running. You've
yeah.
got a
I mean,
schedule to keep.
yeah. I mean, if you submit something and you don't put your age, you could get lucky and get a shot, and then they find out later you're 14 years old. Maybe they wouldn't have done it, right? But that was an incredible story, Jim Shooter, and it's also a very fertile period, young people. I remember when I was in college, and I remember when I was filling up sketchbooks and notebooks, with ideas, and it just was pouring out of you.
Yeah.
That's how they describe Kirby all the time. Other creators, maybe it ebbs and flows. But Kirby. I mean, one thing that was interesting was that Kirby used to go in once a week, and he would be commuting. You have all that time to think about it, right? And you're just thinking about ideas. But he was such a creative guy that you were going, so you have all that time to think on the way there, and then you're getting feedback, and you're working with Stan Lee, and they say Stan Lee would be, Stan and Jack would be in the office talking about storylines, and then Stan would be jumping up on the couch, and they'd be making these sound effects and stuff, and so then Jack Kirby was leaving, and then he would have a commute on the way home, where he got to think about things and get things together in his mind. So by the time he hits the drawing table, he knows exactly what to do, and he's just knocking it out. And it's like, that's the Marvel method. You take advantage of your thinking time, your commuting time, to gather your thoughts. It isn't like, you're sitting at the drawing table and you're just staring at a blank page, right? So,
Yeah, I don't ever have writer's block. I don't. I have the opposite. I literally get paralyzed with how many
yeah,
ideas. I got three ideas going right now. I mean, literally, but they're three ideas that are morphing ideas. In other words, I might have had an idea a year and a half ago, and I built a folder and some sketches and opened up a Word doc, and then it just nothing comes about, and then the next thing you know, and I've got another idea, right, like I said, like yesterday, and then oh, wait a second, this kind of floods into this idea. So I grab that folder and then, and I love that. I mean, I've always said if I could just make a living at doing that, I'd be happy. I don't need uh, product per se or either fame, but the thing about it is the comic book, just to throw out here, this is what are you doing? You
I'm looking for
okay?
my blue line. Yeah, sorry if that's making noise. I didn't know that was picking up, but I'm looking for my blue line pencil.
But
I gotta order the blue pencil leads that go in here,
okay,
because those
okay.
those those things are great. Sorry,
But
thanks for letting me know.
because I'm trying to make this statement here, but this is the art. This
Yeah,
comic as a whole is the art. I know we say, "Oh, this page is the art," but
yeah,
it really is just one step towards getting to the art. When I have the book in my hand, I feel like I'm done. Like I've completed the art form.
right.
So,
Yeah,
going back to like, why we're doing one of these just like pinup episodes just to see what comes out of
For
us.
me, it's
Very much about pushing around these characters and looking, at them um, outside of their on the track story. You've gotten the story going and it's rolling forward. God forbid we get to issue 3 of Turbo. And I start yakking about, well, we need more Martians. I mean, I think Martian, this character we need to, you're kind of thinking like, oh yeah, maybe we could, danger, danger. We don't want to derail. Then you take that. Maybe we end up doing a little one pinup, page between the two of us to just anchor the idea, and then kind of go from there. So I'm very excited and hopeful to the process that you and I are working with on this Turbo Pit Fighter.
Hmm.
But for the most part, it's still we have a lot to do. There's a lot of decision making. As much as that you have 6 issues laid out and 2 of them now completed in layout and pencil. The pencils are for issue 1 are already completed and I'm inking and stuff. There's still a lot of decision making to be had and coming up and inventing to get to the end of issue 6, which would be like chapter 6, part 6 of the whole story of Turbo in the graphic novel
Yep.
sense of it. So um,
Yeah, I also you also are like also revising things and second
yeah.
guessing things because as you get closer and closer to finishing a print comic, you're putting things in stone that that really can't be changed later. And so we were talking about the name of the ruling family and how we get there and what are the science, what are the I guess maladies that that change society, the health maladies that that depopulate the planet so that this apocalypse happens, all that stuff. Oh, and remember we were kind of like settling in on the D. Hubertsons as the name of the family, and then all of these
Yeah.
funny first names. Um, so I was wondering if we knocked out the S, so it becomes D. Huberton,
Ooh.
and the reason why is because then it sounds a little bit subliminally like Halliburton, right? And but also, you're not doing the SON thing, which is kind of, F or whatever, it's kind of traditional, so it's a little more off the beaten. And I think that has a better
I
roll
agree.
to it, better yeah, so yeah, so now once you get like happy with something, you're going forward more confidently because that's going to be right on the cover or the first page rather of issue 2 where we're talking about that, and then we have to explain what happened, all through flashbacks and backstory, but how this family affected the regular the world and sent out this created this military force and whatever it was. So we need to think about that, right? This is going back to the world building. Are they going to be tech giants? Are they going to be like the Bezoses and the Zuckerbergs of their day that, get
Or the
into,
grandchildren of.
military? Right, exactly, right. It's like all this old money, right? That's a great idea, right? Like going back to the beginning of the internet and the the Microsoft fortune or the Amazon fortune. So these are just like the descendants that are just born with all this money, but like so much money, right? Like that's a real good question for our society right now. Is as we see billionaires that are amassing more wealth than has ever been amassed before. You got Elon, you got Bezos, and you got Gates, and all of those guys are have already crossed the threshold of $100 billion, where nobody had ever, I mean, the richest guy 20 years ago in the world was maybe $50 billion, right? Or $60 billion. So now you have multiple people that are worth 100 billion and they're knocking on 200 billion already. They say that Jeff Bezos is on the pace to be the world's first
Mm.
trillionaire. So if these things are happening in real life, you know, and let's say that these things are allowed to happen, and nobody ever makes like a limit on how much money one family can take out of the economy for themselves. If I could editorialize a little bit, then maybe the D. Hubertons become this family, that like literally own like 70% of the wealth, you know, like if it, maybe that's a great, angle to, to to introduce the backstory of how the world got this way. Because Road Warrior was blaming our our addiction to
Mhm.
gas, for everything, because you need gas to get around and travel and all that. And so, what are we going to be blaming it on? Is it greed, or the vulnerability of governments, to corruption and being bought, or could this family have like this incredible technology base because they come from, the Zuckerberg, or the coders and hackers of, that got so rich that they end up just getting into
Well,
military
here's an
hardware.
interesting segue to put a marker because we're 45 minutes in, um, and we do our regular episodes for the Making a Turbo. Um, you've brought this up, and I think it's really an excellent thing to bring up again in a continued pinup episode, where we're continually working on these pinups here. Science fiction. Science fiction relies heavily on reality. The reality that you're relying on is most definitely what is the anxiety of society now. So
Right.
to just look at where we're at right now, you have 100 things, literally 100 things to choose from. That if something goes sideways and slides for 6 months to a year, um, you know, we're fucked. We the
Yeah.
apocalypse of Armageddon has arrived. That seems to be what we live in. The Cold War, World War I, World War II. That segue was huge in Europe, and then of course flooded into other countries around the world because of global economy. Which forced us into World War II. But you get
Hmm.
all the way out to the Cold War ending at some point, uh, physically in the separation or unification of Berlin in '89. But you know there's so much to choose from in order to use a launching point into how Turbo's world gets to this point. Now, I've also been pitching my own little ideas in that we don't have to be so specific as much as it is we bring in elements. We're constantly introducing elements, whether it's a character or a hairstyle or a tattoo or a poster on the
Right.
wall when you're passing through neighborhoods or what have you, or somebody saying or using a saying that does that, like, because I had an idea for, I think it was a Neverfent or Nexfent or something was my thing. And I was definitely leaning on the
Uh-huh.
fentanyl and the pharmaceuticals and all the people just
Right.
making massive amounts of money and pushing the suffering. But, we still have to tie in some heavy elements, and just to kind of bring us back to focus, which is the pit fighting, because we're
Yeah.
turbo pit fighter. So
Pit
we're
fighter.
constantly going to have something that's in and dispersed around um, society collapsing, and then it holding on, and then leaning and using something as pit fighting is to continue on. And of course, our main character
Yeah.
is a heavy participant in it, so pretty cool. So
Yeah. Yeah. And we're gonna have to have young turbos first, pit fight
yeah,
or
I'm very
something,
excited
right?
for
We're gonna
that.
have to
Yep, yep,
spotlight that.
yep.
But yeah, we do have a pit fight in number three. That's for sure. The number three is going to be centered around the pit fight, and then number four and five, the flashbacks will be all this stuff, in the prisons and the tunnels and the trees and stuff. But then the current day will just be, yeah, it'll just be pit fights, and then the fights that ensue after all the pit fights go south.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yep,
You
yep,
know,
yep. So I mean,
right? I mean, because that's
yeah, I
part of it
mean,
too.
I know you're just as excited as I am, Jake, that we have a lot of work cut out for us. And it's the major reason we're involved in this is that uh, we enjoy it, like having fun, playing around with it, but then even getting down to the point of putting it together. So, um, you know,
Yep, we have the problem of too many ideas,
yeah,
not enough time, and so it's good in a way, but that's why we got to lay it all out, so that we can try to make some headway here, and fighting against the time, fighting against the clock
right.
all the time.
All right. Well, we're going to definitely do this again because I
Yeah, man.
felt like this was a really um thoughtful little time to spend in the creative process and the building of Turbo Pit Fighter, a world.
Yeah, I got pretty far. I pretty much penciled this. I've started to bring in the
Move over to the right,
the beat
pull
up
it over to the
guys,
right, just so you. Oh yeah, cool, cool.
and yeah, so he'll have like a busted jaw, but I like better. The reason why I was rustling around before. I was looking for my blue pencil because I love when you could do it in blue pencil then and then go
Yeah,
over it with black
yeah,
pencil. So because this whole scratchy version would just be in blue
right.
and then it just kind of melts away when you
Right.
go over it. Um, I think I'm going to. I don't know if I'm going to put lettering on this, but there's some room above um, and I just didn't finish this leg is all, but if I do lettering, I think I have to be careful that this pad is a little bit out of format. I think I might have to leave like this much. I might have to leave like this much out in order to have the right format
Right.
here. The right you shrink down to a comic size. We are married to the
We
comic
are.
size, right? Yeah, yeah. So and then I don't know. I don't have any other word balloons or anything here. So I could just make this a pit fight. I mean, just a pit back here, and just you know, and then you're stuck drawing the teeming crowd. So just by making this the wall here, I just kind of screwed myself. But that's when you throw in some good Jack Kirby lettering, right?
Yes. And a
Instead,
paragraph explaining.
yeah, her word balloon's gonna say, "I don't want to draw all these
Oh.
people in the crowd."
All right, Jake. Well, I'm glad we busted out on this Friday at 11 because you had the day off from work, and we're able to
Yes, happy
happy
Veterans
Veterans
Day
Day. So,
to
but it looks like we'll we'll we'll
all the
we'll give another
veterans
one of
out
these
there.
a go and continue our conversation about building Turbo and the influences
Oh,
that could bring us along.
yes, I'm down to give it a go, and I have a little pile of goodies too
All
for that one. So
right.
we could do a little bit of
Cool.
this and that.
Cool. All right. Well, with that being said, I say goodbye. Until next time.
Yeah, peace, my
Later.
brother.